great artist make himself felt. I mean, what's the impression an artist leaves on you? It's just something that stays with you somehow. It's moved you. It's reached you.
I just enjoyed his music when I heard him play at our lessons or played some jobs a little later after knowing him, and it was a whole new world to me that was very interesting.
Well, he was teaching me sight reading, notes, theory, and well, as I said, one of the most wonderful things of going to Lennie was the inspiration he gave you.
He had many students. People came to study with him literally from all over the world. And his desire was to set up something for us that would enable us to thrive as artists. And some of them really distinguished themselves in the music. I think one of the most extraordinary musicians in the history of this art form is Sheila Jordan. Now, you know, the voice is really an extremely difficult instrument. Actually, the voice may be the hardest instrument of them all, especially in terms of being a creative artist, which is what Sheila Jordan has really achieved.
I was looking for a teacher, and Charlie Mingus recommended Lennie to me. I said, I really would like to go to a teacher, not to necessarily learn how to sing, because I'm a natural singer. I've sung since I was 3 years old, but for somebody who could direct me. I knew that my idol was Bird, but I needed somebody to lay it out for me. And Charles Mingus said, well, you know, you really ought to study with Lennie. And I said, well, he's not taking singers, you know. But he said, well, you never know, you know. I mean, I think he would take you. And when I first went for my first lesson, I'll never forget it. He said, well, he said, you know, one of the first things I'd like you to do is to sing a bird line. He said, I'd like you to learn a bird line. And I said, well, which one, you know? I think it was to Embraceable You. And I said, well, I know it. Then he put the record on and I sang it. And he was very surprised. Even Lennie was surprised. He said, you sing the bird lines better than anybody I know. And that was a wonderful compliment. I don't know. I don't remember that one. I remember something like that. Now I'd have to go back and get my records out and then check it up. Yeah, he knew the right ones to tell you to listen to. They all sang with Bird, they all sang with Roy, they all sang with Prez. Now you really had to sing with Prez, you know.
From the beginning, I was singing with the great improvised solos that were on record. People like Billie Holiday, Lester Young, Charlie Parker, Roy Eldridge, Charlie Christian, and Bud Powell, and Fats Navarro, the people who he thought were really great and could teach someone about improvising on a feeling level, and at the same time expand their ears, because you know, if you're going to sing with a record, you have nothing to lean on. You have no sheet music to read, and you can't really rely on your brain because you're not memorizing it. You're singing with it. Only your ears are going to give you the notes.
I mean, you're standing there naked with your voice, no instrument. Does it sound musical? Yeah, of course.
So it's a terrific, natural, real way of training the ear in the way that you need if you're going to play everything that you hear spontaneously.
You cannot fake anything with your voice. You can push a key on the piano and make pitch, but you must do it with your inner faculty for hearing, to reproduce with the voice what's in your head. It's as simple as that. It's the perfect teaching tool. But a lot of musicians are reluctant to use their voices, curiously enough. You can say they hide behind their instruments. 317 East 32nd Street. Yeah, it was Lennie's studio. It's a studio where he had his private practice and sessions on Wednesdays and Saturdays for any or all of his students.
It was one large room, and then in the back he had like the studio where he recorded, the little recording studio, and a little place for him to rest. You went for your lesson, and then you came back to the session that night. And I loved the sessions because that meant you could try out your feelings and your ideas, and I'll never forget that.
I love you, I know what you so baby think it over, you are so terrific, gotta be specific, so baby think of my dream about you now.
People play, there were rhythm sections, Peter End, Al Levitt, Ronnie Ball was another piano player studying with Lennie. Warren, always Warren, Ted Brown, Sal, as I said. And if Lennie really felt something was really beginning to happen, like a new direction was happening, he'd sit down and play, and it was wonderful. It used to be a kick to watch Warren, and when he was really on it, boy, he was so emotional. His whole body just moved back. You know, it was wonderful to watch him play. He was really something to see, and of course here. These sessions would go on until wee hours of the morning. It would be daylight, and we'd walk out of the studio. Actually, 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. And nobody was getting stoned or getting high or anything. We were just doing music. It was beautiful.
We thought as part of a group, not as stars, which became pretty common soon after, you know. It means being able to share a sense of rhythm with the other players, and it means being able to relate harmonically, to be in harmony with the other players. It's not just a matter of thinking the same chords. It's literally the sense of being able to function in harmony with another person.
I think Warren is one of the great improvisers of all time. And it's amazing to me that after all these years, there are still a few people that were moved enough by that music to not understand why we're not still doing it and whatever. The fact is that we don't play together anymore, and it's unfortunate because that's a rare privilege to be able to play with people. It's not easy to just get together.
Well, we're to some extent working in different mediums already. He's worked with an enormous variety of groups, which I don't really care to do any more than I have to.
Well, we were entirely different people with different experiences, you know, and we both studied with Tristano and had the opportunity to play in his band, so there was that common ground, but we were really totally different people.
And look at how intimate the relation is between musicians who improvise together, you know? If it's going to make sense, it has to be adult thinking all the way, and an adult relationship. It's not one-nighters, you know. It's people who will spend time together, which is, not too common.
I know there were some people that studied with Tristano for 20, 25 years, and that sounded a little bit much. I know you're supposed to stay with the master for a length of time to really learn your lessons, but that sounds like a bit of an exaggeration to me. There's something else involved there, I think. But at any rate, everybody has to do what they have to do. I had to try to do my own things. I felt that I just wanted to find out what it was that was meaningful to me, away from that kind of a strong influence, as I think one must do eventually. In '62, Connie Carruthers came to study with me when I was living outside of San Francisco, and I explained to her what I had been working on and my studies with Tristano, but not being a piano player per se, I told her where Tristano was, and she went there immediately, and has been a very faithful practitioner of that music, perpetuating that method of teaching, and as a performer.
This is Lennie Tristano's magnificent piano. You know, I came up as a classical player, and I also wanted to be a composer. But I wasn't happy with the classical scene, and I wanted to get into jazz. And a friend of mine played one track by Lennie Tristano. This track was Requiem. Now, I think that track lasts about 3 minutes and a few seconds or so. And in the space of that short amount of time, my entire life was transformed. And my future was completely changed, and I knew it. When I heard that single track, I knew a lot about Lennie already. Of course, I knew about what a magnificent instrumentalist he was, and also what an intensely and genuinely creative and innovative artist and musician he was. And this meant everything to me, because I was looking for something that not only was powerfully creative and really new, but not contrived or not abstract. I wanted something that sounded rooted and real. And Lennie's music came through to me that way then. You know, Lennie's music, as powerfully innovative as it is really rooted deeply in jazz as it evolved as a musical art form. Started out, I was working on some basic things. Actually, the first thing he had me do was to separate my hands, which I had never done before. Even as a child, at my first lesson, I had my hands together. So he told me to only play with my hands separated for a while. And I had to really work on my concentration in order to have my awareness right there with me while I was playing these simple melodies of standard tunes with no accompaniment. He felt that every piano player should be as spontaneous and as open and loose and creative with a single note line as a horn player. So we had to start there. We can't have the whole thing happening unless we have already achieved that. If we try to put chords to it first, it's like trying to fly when you have a millstone around your neck. So I spent months upon months before I started putting my hands back together again. And by the time I did, of course, the piano seemed quite different to me. These lines for his band, and one of his primary concerns was that the music would be as complex, as challenging, and as spontaneous sounding as anything that he would improvise. That was his conception. In 1964, down at the Half Note, Lennie reunited his band with Warren and Lee. And for me, it was electrifying the moment you walked through the door. It's as if the music put a certain energy into the air in the room, and it really reached out and grabbed you as soon as you came in the door. Lennie always wanted to perform. He loved to play for people. And this was one of the things in his life that meant the most to him. And he was making plans, musically, within his own mind, for the expansion of this quintet. What happened was that he had less opportunities to play in the way that he would have wanted. And the nightclub scene, the jazz club scene in New York, actually closed up. This affected all of the jazz musicians, and of course it also affected Lennie.
By 65, he had decided the only way to go any further with performing for himself would be to have his own place to perform, as simple as that. Have complete control or command of the situation. And the mid-60s were very poor years economically for jazz in America. So it's perhaps just as well that he didn't open a club then. And Lennie was more or less confronted with having to make a decision between performing, which he would only want to do if he could give full time to it. He could perform if he chose to, from then on, be a star. or teaching, which also is full-time. You can't be coming and going with a teaching practice. So he chose to teach from about 65 on.
And I think that was unfortunate for all of us because he was a great musician, and I think he would really like to have been out playing. Because when he was out, he was very excited, you know, and he enjoyed communicating that way. And that, after all, is the whole name of that game.
By that time, Lennie had virtually done everything, including earn a well-deserved name for himself as an innovator. He had led a band off and on for 20 years. He had taught and recorded. He had his own record company, traveled. You know, just for 20 years, done about everything a jazz musician can do. You know? And it wasn't that attractive a world.
I think the nightclub scene is dead. So that's a big problem we have. All the people really want to listen to jazz and love it, but they're not interested in the nightclub scene. What has to happen is that, according to where jazz is, an environment has to develop which is suited to what's happening now, instead of trying to put what's happening now in that same crazy environment it grew up in. See, that part of it, in my opinion, is over.
He didn't associate jazz with the jazz club scene. He didn't see what it was about jazz that fit into that atmosphere. He couldn't match up jazz, for example, with drinking. He thought that it should be in a truly artistic setting, but loose, not formal, where people could socialize and listen to some beautiful music and just enjoy it.
We should have jazz performed in the afternoon or in the early evening, so that it's not only intimate, but informal. In fact, I do it here. You see all my beautiful Norwegian chairs I got sitting around here. And it works out great because it's a good room, the sound is good, and it has a very intimate feeling to it.
In the last years of his life, he presented people in his own home, students and associates of his, and he also presented people in concert, and he had a mind to reactivate his own record label, Jazz Records, so that people who he thought had something to contribute could have an opportunity to record. And this is what the Lennie Tristano Jazz Foundation was formed to do, to continue Lennie's work, presenting artists in a situation that was free from any kind of commercial pressure so that they could really express their music.
Many people over the years passed through his teaching place and picked up some essential materials from him, including Cecil Taylor, who just one evening came into a club I was working in New York and just said, how do you feel now in retrospect about your association with Tristano? He said, you know, I studied with him for a while, and I've heard that influence in many people, even Bill Evans, who was obviously influenced to some extent by Tristano, verbally would pay that tribute to me rather than Lennie, which I always thought, I understood what he meant, but I thought that, I feel that a lot of people resented Tristano, if I might say this, because he was a very severe critic of others.
Lennie repelled a lot of people. What he wasn't, though, was neutral. He never left you in any doubt about what he meant. He was a very articulate person. He never asked anybody else to speak for him. He just wasn't that way.
Well, you know, Lennie, I know you're out there with birds and we're playing, and I just think it would be beautiful that if more people in the world would know Lennie Tristano as the musician and as the creative and beautiful, great player that he was. That would be wonderful, because I think he'd smile down on us. I think Bird would too, Billy and Press. He deserves it.
And we intend to continue his work without stopping until we have expressed as much as can be expressed. So I imagine for myself, this is going to take me certainly the rest of my years, which is a very beautiful thing for me to look forward to, because there is so much music. And I know that this music, coming out of Lennie's beautiful feeling for all of us, will go out in the world and will be heard and expressed indefinitely.